This year's Thanksgiving travel period gearing up to be the busiest since 2019. Over 55 million Americans, I should say, expected to travel 50 miles or more from home. Joining us right now with the top tips this holiday season, Brian Kelly, CEO of The Points Guy. So, Brian, well, let's start with this. If you haven't got your ticket, are you just out of luck? That's what we're going to find out?
You know, there are still some deals out there. You know, Thanksgiving's actually a great time to go to Europe, especially in business class, because a lot of those business travelers are staying home. So we've been seeing 2,000 to 2,500 from many U.S. gateways to Europe. But overall, airfare is rising about 6% over last year. So there's not tons of deals. But it's a tough time for the airlines because they're seeing, you know, gas or fuel is up 40%, as well as a lot of the labor costs. Most of the pilots unions and flight attendant unions have been renegotiating much more lucrative contracts. So the airlines are being squeezed by, you know, a tepid increase in demand, but skyrocketing costs.
What do you, I mean, you talked about going to Europe and it's cheaper. Is that a function of some of the, I mean, there's a big question about Americans traveling out of the country, in part because of what we're seeing in the Middle East?
Yeah. You know, we've seen a huge, you know, naturally we see the shift from Europe in the summer go to the Caribbean, Mexico, Central America. We're seeing that even more now. And also an increase in trans-Pacific travel. United has made a huge bet on Australia, New Zealand. They've got a bunch of new routes. So that's where most of the increases in travel are coming from. You know, Dubai continues to be a hotspot globally for tourism. But yes, I think a lot of Americans are saying, well, this year, let's go back to the Caribbean. And that's where we're seeing, you know, sold out flights and astronomical resort prices.
OK, so does that mean an upgrade is out of the picture? I mean, nobody's getting to the airport and being happily told that you're one of the lucky few. Is there a lucky few this year?
Upgrades do happen, but they're few and far between these days, sadly.
By the way, it used to be, I actually wanted to ask you about this. It used to be that you could buy a coach ticket and then use miles to upgrade. And now it seems like that's sort of off the table, that you can't do that anymore. Is that correct?
Basically, you know, Delta this year, they rolled back a lot of their elite perks and people were up in arms. But when you look at the numbers, you know, 10 years ago, the airlines were maybe selling a quarter of their business in first class cabins and then letting upgrades and elite members get all those other seats. They flipped it. It's now 80, 90%. That's how the airlines are squeezing
it out. Do it anymore.
Yeah, so it's tough these days to get the upgrade. So I say try to book in advance. I use Google Flights, flexible search to sniff out those cheap business class fares.
Okay, so what do you do? Give us the ninja move on how you find the cheap flight. You know, there's all
the ninja move.
I don't know if it's a myth or not. You know, like, was it Tuesday night or Wednesday night at midnight? You know, the stuff rolls over. Is any of that real anymore?
The cheap airfares, no. The airlines do dynamic pricing, so it changes by the second, right? But the biggest tip is getting award travel. Most of us have frequent flyer miles. The airlines are releasing a lot of award seats. I always like using the foreign frequent flyer programs, Flying Blue. Just last night, Qatar Airways released a ton of award space around the world. If you ever want to do Maldives, there's multiple seats.
Okay, but Brian, here's what we need to know. So you just said last night that all those flights were released. How would us peasants know that actually happened and then know that we're supposed to jump on that opportunity besides reading The Points Guy?
Yeah.
Is there some other method at work here?
Yeah, Thrifty Traveler has a newsletter, and you can sign up for premium fare alerts, cheap deals. They'll email you. I also love Roam, ROAME.travel. It's an app where you can actually search for award availability by month. So you can, and that's how real experts sniff out these cheapest fares. Because in the case of Qatar, that Q Suite's the best in the world, and it's only $70,000.
Hold on, let's put that up on the screen. Give us those names again. What are those two?
ROAME.travel. It's it just won the best.
This is real news you can use, folks. Okay, and what was the other one?
And Thrifty Traveler, they have a email alert. Last night I got one saying wide open availability on using Q Suites, and it actually will tell you use your American airline miles because they're partners. So let other people do the work. Get a $5 or $10 a month charge for these services.
How far ahead are you getting to the airport? Are you getting there an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours? Do you have Clear? Do you not? Half the time I have Clear. Half the time these days you have Clear, and it's like the TSA line has less people in it than the Clear line.
Yeah, always double check. I mean, TSA pre-check is the absolute bare minimum. If you don't have that, you shouldn't be traveling. But global entry is $100. It'll get you TSA pre-check and global entry. Clear is good in some airports, but in some, it's gotten so popular, like Atlanta, where you really do have to judge. It might be quicker to just go through the pre-check lane. But these days, I get to the airport an hour before most flights.
Are you checking bags for an hour before? No.
Well, yeah, if you're checking bags, you got to get there at least an hour before. A lot of airlines will have that hour or 45-minute before the departure check or a cutoff time. So, if you have the time, get there, I would say at least 90 minutes before all flights in the U.S.